Good night and good luck. You've probably heard that phrase before, right? It's the famous sign-off from a legendary journalist and the title of a really fantastic film. But what's interesting is a recent article in Dawn argues it's also the perfect lens for understanding a political ghost that, well, is still haunting us today.
So the source material for this explainer kicks off with this really powerful idea. It says that McCarthyism, well, it's not just some dusty chapter in a history book. It's more like a persistent spirit, something that thrives on witch hunts and, manufactured fear. And that's an idea we really need to unpack.
Which really brings us to the core question here. I mean, how can a movie set way back in the 1950s, talking about stuff from that time, possibly hold a mirror up to our world right now? Well, it turns out the answer is quite a lot, actually. All right, let's get into it. And we're going to start exactly where the article does with George Clooney's incredible film, Good Night and Good Luck. Now, the thing about this film is it's not just some simple good guys versus bad guys story. No, it's a really deep look inside a newsroom. It shows you how all those commercial pressures, that fear of losing sponsors or advertisers, how that can slowly, quietly just suffocate the courage you need to report the truth. It's a story about the quiet creep of compromise, but it's also about the incredible power of integrity. So the film gives us this perfect case study, right? But what exactly is this thing called McCarthyism that the main character, Murrow, was fighting against? Let's break down the playbook that the article lays out for us. Okay, so at its heart, McCarthyism is a system that basically turns suspicion into a weapon. The way that article describes it is just brilliant. It wraps itself in the flag of true patriotism and then uses twisted logic and made-up fears to hunt down and shut up anyone who dares to disagree. And according to our source, this whole playbook, it really boils down to 4 key tactics. And wow, it's a devastatingly effective formula. Here's how it works. First, you brand yourself as the only real patriot. Step 2, anyone who questions you is automatically labeled disloyal or unpatriotic. Then you just hurl these wild, baseless accusations to destroy their careers. And finally, you create such a climate of fear that everyone else is just too scared to speak up. It's a strategy designed to completely, and I mean completely, control the narrative. Okay, let's keep going because here's where it gets really fascinating. The article argues that this playbook, it's not new at all. In fact, it's a pattern of persecution that you can see echoing all the way back through the centuries. And this timeline just lays it out so clearly. Think about the logic from the European witch trials. Scapegoating vulnerable people during a crisis, using some phony manual to justify it. Well, that is the exact same logic Senator McCarthy used. The author makes the case that this core tactic, making up a threat to grab more power, is like a ghost that just keeps coming back again and again. So all of this history, this pattern, it leads us right to the article's main point. And the point is, this isn't just history. The same playbook is alive and well today. And the author uses the modern media landscape in Pakistan as a really powerful, really current case study. So the article traces this long, consistent history of the state putting pressure on the media. What's changed are the methods. It evolved over the decades from just blunt force, like state ordinances and direct censorship, to more sophisticated things like bans and shutting down channels. And today, the author calls the restrictions more layered and complex. But the goal, the core intent, that stayed exactly the same. But, and this is so important, the story isn't just about suppression. It's also a story of incredible resilience, of amazing courage. Because for as long as there's been pressure, there has always been pushback. And this is where the author really shines a spotlight on this small but incredibly determined community of journalists who have just consistently stood up to these forces. You see their struggle documented in the work of people like Hussain Naqi. His memoir and interviews are framed as a kind of Pakistani version of Good Night and Good Luck. It's a real-world story of that very same battle for integrity, and it just proves that this fight, it's universal. So all of this, it leads to the biggest, most important question the article asks. If history shows us time and time again that silencing the press has never actually created the stability that people claim to want, then why on earth does this tactic keep getting used over and over? All right, let's head into our final section and see how the author tries to answer that huge paradox. This table just lays out the core contradiction perfectly. On one side, you have the belief held by regime after regime, that the media is the source of all the instability. But then you look at the other side, the historical reality, and what the article points out is that even after silencing the press for years, for decades, the country never actually escaped that chaos. The whole premise is just wrong. It's fundamentally flawed. So the big takeaway here is this. The whole strategy of crushing dissent to create order is a total failure. It has never, ever worked. It's never produced the outcome people wanted, and as the author notes, it probably never will. It's just a self-defeating cycle. And so the article wraps up by borrowing a timeless line from Shakespeare. The fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves. It's not about some external, uncontrollable destiny. The fault is in us. It's a recurring human-made mistake, a failure to learn from the crystal-clear lessons of history. And that failure leaves us to say again and again, good night and good luck.